Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of In-Depth Angling. I'm excited to record this today as we break down the fall white bass patterns, locations, tips, and techniques that catch more and bigger white bass on Stockton Lake. Let's dive into this and start breaking this lake down. White bass fishing in the fall on Stockton Lake is one of my favorite things to do in the Ozarks. The lake stretches out over 298 miles of shoreline, starting on the north side of the lake with the dam and spreading south down the two main river arms and several numerous creek arms along the way. Stockton Lake has great open water structure offshore in the main channel and creek arms of the lake that make great habitat for white bass year-round. Combine that with the large baitfish population made mostly of shad, it's no surprise that Stockton Lake is home to great numbers and size of white bass. During the early fall, white bass are easiest to catch during the early morning and late evening as they chase schools of shad over main lake areas above the thermocline where water temps are still hot from the heat of summer as we start to get the cool down going in the fall. What I have here in front of me on the screen is a couple different examples of some offshore areas, such as a flat that sticks way off over here into the main part of the channel and the main part of the lake. If you come over here, you have a main lake point and an old creek bed cove that comes out right through here as well. It's kind of offshore. There's a submerged bridge, submerged road bed from back whenever the lake was still a river and before they flooded it. And we have over here on the very left side of the screen with this tight line is going to be a cliff face, and it's going to be where the old river channel used to push right up against. So this used to be river valley and probably a ridge top right here next to all this that's going on. So there's tons of different depth change out there, even in the middle of the lake, where these fish are able to set up and live year-round. Stockton Lake also has several different islands in it that white bass use during this time of year in the early part of the fall transition from summer. As we have that hot water still, they're still on the offshore structure. They like to use these main lake islands out here towards the dam, and they also have several other ones that are just off the main channel as you go up some of these creek arms. Like there's one over here close to Masters Public Use Area. As I come up here, there's one right there that's pretty big and is easily able to be accessed by fishermen. And there's several others around some of these other boat landings around here. There's a small one right there. So these little islands usually have good structure that's submerged below the surface as well that these white bass are using. Topwater lures are great for catching larger schools of white bass in the fall as the fish break the surface in a feeding frenzy, chasing bait right at the surface level. One of my favorite topwater baits to use during the fall, early time, and throughout the middle section when those fish are busting on bait pretty much constantly whenever they're going into their feeding mode, are these Rebel Pop R's. I like to use them pretty aggressively when I'm targeting white bass specifically instead of largemouth. That's the result there. I like to cast these things over an open flat bank around where there's a point, anywhere you even have like a little bit of some wind pushing into. These are great whenever the fish are up shallow and chasing bait, and whenever they're up and out even on the main part of the lake still busting on shad as we start to get into the cool down at the end of summer and beginning of fall. Really get their attention, work them fast. With short little pops is usually how I do it, but if you're having a lot of wind chop on there, sometimes you really want to get that thing going hard, jerking your rod tip back towards you and making that thing really splash and make a lot of commotion and get their attention, and they will come out and crush this thing. Another one I really love to use this time of year is a head-in Super Spook Junior. Kind of darts back and forth like a fleeing bait fish on the surface. When those fish are boiling, you'll actually see little bait fish kind of moving in an erratic motion whenever they're coming up out of the water trying to get away from these white bass that are feeding on them. And the spook imitates that really well. It kind of darts side to side as you work it back with your rod tip and the slack in your line. There's several different videos out there about how you can work one of these things. I'll probably be making one on the channel here fairly soon, so keep an eye out for that. I already have one out for how to use the Rebel Pop R, at least for bass on a more of a largemouth setting, but you guys can go check that out too. It's the same thing for white bass, just work a little bit more aggressive and more faster. I'll have it linked here at the end of the video for you and in the description below if you're interested in that. Swim baits catch both good numbers and size all fall and can be used any depth the fish move to as the white bass feed heavy, chasing shad wherever they go. It's important to match the size of the swim bait close to the size of the shad or bait fish that you're seeing in the area you are fishing. and to fish relatively fast, as white bass love to chase bait fish as they flee away from them and dart past. It is a reactionary thing for them, and they love to chase. It makes them want to go chase whenever you have something moving pretty quick, and that vibration of that kicking tail coming right by them just does something to them where they got to go and get it. This is a Kitech swim bait. It's about 3.5 inches long. They have different sizes of them. I like to use the ones that match the size the best to whatever I'm seeing that day. As we go throughout the fall, the beginning of the fall and the end of fall, the shad size changes quite a bit throughout the lake. Sometimes you'll be in a spot that's got smaller bait, and sometimes you'll be in a spot that's got bigger bait, depending on where you're at in the lake and exactly what your time frame is looking at there. I love to keep my colors pretty simple, something that's kind of more of a shad color, something that's got some silvers, it's got some whites in it. This is going to be a good one to use all fall, the most versatile of any of these baits I'm really going to be talking about today. You can fish them fast, you can fish them a little bit slower if they're kind of sitting on some deeper water. You can pop them up off the bottom to get reaction strikes like you would with a jig and wrap or a spoon even. Another one I really have good success with for the white bass are these little crappie grub sliders. I use them a lot for crappie fishing in the spring and in the fall as well, and even for catching some walleye. So these little baits right here do great whenever you have those really small bait fish around. Maybe you have a lot of really small shad that are swimming around up shallow. These are excellent. They catch white bass in all sizes. I like to pair this up with either plain little jig head, somewhere around like 1/8 to 1/4 ounce. Cast that thing around. I'm really working it pretty fast and covering through some water. You'll find active feeding white bass very quickly in the fall if you're in the right area. A little underspin for either the Kitechs or little crappie slider jigs. They're a little bit pricier to do this. It's why I try not to do it as much if I'm going to be fishing in areas that I'm more likely to get snagged in. These are good, especially whenever you have a good wind. The extra little bit of flash gets their attention, and that just drives the white bass insane. Inline spinners, beetle spins with a white grub on the back of them, and rooster tail baits all do excellent at being worked quickly, imitating a darting bait fish, which I mentioned before is a very good trigger for white bass to go and feed, with tons of flash and vibration coming off the metallic blade. Gets white bass to chase ones here, and they come in different sizes, different weights anyway. I like to use stuff that has got a lot of shine to it during this time of year. Stuff that's like silver. You can use some kind of funky colors in here as well. But really, if you just want to get like 1 or 2 different colors, I get some silver, maybe some gold, or something with like some chartreuse in it in case you get a more of a muddy water. We do have to go through the fall turnover period, which clouds the water up a little bit after that thermocline loosens up in the lake. Another one I really love to use is a MEPS, and these things do excellent as well. It's the same exact thing. It's got a little bit more some of that dressing around the skirt of this where that hook is at. You'll probably even run into the occasional catfish and walleye up there throwing these things around. You're going to find all kinds of stuff that are eating these shad up shallow, because this is the time of year everything in Stockton Lake is going to feed. And the white bass, in my opinion, are about the most aggressive feeders of them all. And this is a great lure. If I had to pick one lure to throw all fall, just because of how fun they are to throw around and how effective they are, especially when they get up and they're starting to feed really good. Now water temperature gets right for it. These are my favorite to throw. If you're looking for the most versatile, I'd throw a swim bait. So if you're just going to look to go catch a lot of white bass, don't have a lot of money, and you want to get a few lures that are going to do some good, some inline spinners, and go get yourself some swim baits. And that will take care of it for you on most situations. This is something that I like to use that's more specific. It's a jigging wrap, or you can use a spoon as well. They are good from deeper water, wherever you're fishing more vertically and you don't have a lot of snags around. You're looking at catching these fish that are hanging out closer towards the bottom, whether you just had a really big cold front and these fish are pushed off a little bit deeper, or whether you're having something where those white bass are sitting up on the end of a point or on an edge of a drop-off right next to a flat, like what we showed earlier on the map. Those kind of areas that are kind of void of snags, they have a good, almost like silt-like next to some rock transition. These are going to do really well. I like to throw a lot of chrome with this, same kind of colors. I'm keeping it basic, just trying to imitate something with shad. This is not something that is going to be like a really big staple for me during the fall on Stockton, but this is something that I can catch them on very good if given the right conditions where those fish are pushed off a little bit. And you can work these things by ripping them up pretty quickly. You'll get reaction strikes from those fish as that bait darts and it kind of flutters really quick. Usually they'll hit it on the fall, and they absolutely crush this thing in the right conditions. Trolling for white bass with cranks can be very good on Stockton in the fall when fish are on the edge of channel drops, flats, and points that are long sections of area to cover. Trolling helps cover that water quicker in these large open water areas. Some examples of some crankbaits I love to throw on Stockton, whether it's white bass, crappie, or walleye. I love throwing these shad wraps, good multi-species bait in Stockton Lake, but it's a white bass killer as well. I also love throwing these Berkeley flicker shads for just about everything in Stockton Lake. If I'm going to be trolling a crankbait, going to be able to cover a lot of water. Find out if there are active white bass around them really quickly by trolling around through those spots with some of these down, and just hang on, because if you do find a good school of white bass, just keep going back and forth around that same area, or stop and go ahead and start casting some of these other baits I showed you earlier, and you'll clean up on them really well. Water temperatures cool faster in the shallower ends of the lake before the main channel. Deeper water near the dam cools down enough to kick off the fall bite. This area up here on these river arms are going to cool a lot faster. They're narrower, they're shallower, and they have runoff coming in from this area over here from this river coming in. And a lot of these different backs, these bigger coves, you can kind of see some of the blue tails coming off of here. These old creeks, before the lake was flooded up, these used to be old creeks that used to flow down into this river. And now they're really big coves. The creeks still flow into the back of them. And whenever you have like cold rain in the fall, like we often do here in the Ozarks, that water in the back of those coves is going to cool off a lot faster. If the water in the main part of the lake out here in the main channel is really warm, to the point where shad are looking for colder water, they'll flock back here along with everything else that wants to eat them. If it's already pretty cool back here and you have that cold runoff coming in, then those fish are going to want to move back off the next deep break or further out towards the main channel, wherever they are able to go back into that same kind of comfortable water temperature for them. This is going to be a hit and miss, but when it's on, it's really on, and you definitely want to be fishing the backs of coves a lot during this time of year. This area down here by the dam is going to be the last area to really cool. If I zoom in here, you guys will be able to see just how deep it is over here. The wider areas are indicating a deeper channel and deeper contours. So all this out here, like you can see, just if I click on this contour line right here, there's 82 right there next to it. And this is coming over here where these lines are a little steeper. This is the old river channel. That's down into the 90s. Like over here it's saying 97, 98 foot deep right there. So it's a lot deeper. It's going to take a lot longer for the cool air to actually cool down that section of the lake. So this is going to be warmer longer. It's not going to be in the fall pattern as quickly, but it's also going to be in the fall pattern a lot longer than it will be on those areas up there near the rivers. The area down here closer towards the dam, especially in the beginning part of the fall, will have a lot more shad in the back of these coves here than they will in the main part of the lake, because this is an area where that cool water is coming in, and it's going to be colder, even a few degrees colder in the back of this cove here where there's a creek coming in. A lot of runoff is flowing into the back of after some storms, as opposed to it is at the mouth of this cove and in the main channel. So really pay attention to your water temperature. It's going to be a very big deal for you during this time of year, and it's going to affect where the fish are going to go and where you're going to be able to have the best luck out there that day. Wherever there are good numbers of bait fish and some wind-blown shoreline, hungry white bass are never really far away. Windy banks with bottom transition from soft silt to rock are very high percentage spots if the shad are in the area. Cast them on wind-blown points and different banks on the main channel and in the backs of coves after the water temperature cools down into the 50s. As the get a little bit further, as we get some more cool days stacked up and everything kind of moves further into the season, this channel out here will start to cool a little bit more. The backs of these coves will become more volatile. They'll still use them, but they also will kind of leave them at times and cruise along the banks a little bit more, especially when you have wind. Those bait fish will kind of congregate around those windy points on Stockton Lake, windy flats. I'll come back up here and show you guys a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. You're going to want to try to fish some of this offshore structure, especially in the early fall, but as you get into the mid-fall and this stuff is really cooling down a lot, you can find some fish cruising around out here on the main flats. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't go check that out, but I do find more and bigger fish, bigger schools of fish I should say, up here closer towards the shore, and they can be right off of these main lake flats, but they will be like if the wind is pushing over here out of the direction coming from the right of your screen over to the left, then this bank over here will be loaded up with bait and it will be loaded up with white bass. You come into some of these other points and stuff in here, and inside this cove is a big secondary point that sticks out pretty flat and tapering. This is going to be a good spot if you get some wind coming on this. Even when the lake is down quite a bit, we've gone there before during this time of year and fished for white bass, and the lake's down several feet, and this is still a good area to go try. So I'm showing you guys this contour map here. This is rated at full pool, but when you go there in the fall, especially if you have a dry summer, there might be several feet of water that is showing on this map that's not actually there. It's going to be land. So you are going to get a little bit of a view of what the bottom is like around the shore there better. You'll be able to see what's kind of under the water, and you'll see where the transitions are. Kind of pay attention to the bottom content that you're seeing along the shores. That'll help you find some of those key spots that white bass are using. Sometimes you'll find some flats out here that have a underwater hump to them and some points that kind of stick off. Like this area here has got a hump, and this has got an old point that sticks off here right next to a creek bed. These are really high percentage spots. There's some depth changes right there. Here in the wind direction will kind of change up whether or not the fish are sitting up on this side of it in the deeper edge, or if they're on the shallow side, or even over here onto the bank. So wind direction is key. The water temperature is key. Keeping an eye on where the bait fish are moving to is going to be absolutely key. And those are really the main three factors I'm looking for in the fall that are going to help me consistently pattern and catch more white bass on Stockton. Last fall when I was out on Stockton with some family members, we went out and we filmed some of it, and were able to catch good numbers and really big white bass as well into some of these little pockets that are scattered along a lot of the lake coves around here. You'll find little pockets inside of the cove, and usually that's where you'll have like a bottom transition in there as well. If you have some wind blowing directly into there, don't overlook those. And the fall white bass fishing continues to be a shallow water game until water temperatures drop down into the 40s as shad move more to stable deep water to avoid effects of the cold, while bass follow them back out to the old river channels from before the lake was dammed and flooded in 1969. A lot of these old creek channels here, like this one sitting in like the mid-low 40s, in this cove here at the mouth of this, and then it goes into the upper 40s in the channel. You'll a lot of times see the white bass kind of transition out back into these deeper creek beds, and a lot of times they'll stay there into the late fall and into the early winter. There's also a lot of different old creek beds that stick off and through some of these flats where there used to be an old creek, and this is a good area here to go and find some around this island. Caught great numbers of white bass off these points. This island here, these got old road beds are good spots because it's a transition on the bottom from usually a soft area to a really, really hard area where they used to have that road at. Those are always good key areas that I like to look for. You can find some road beds that come up shallow around some of that structure too, but as those fish are moving back out into some of these shallow areas that are really right next to that deeper edge, they'll gravitate more back into the channels and work their way back over into the main river channel, even at times to avoid the effects of that cold. The deep channels give good structure for white bass to winter in. The winter pattern will take hold on the shallower river arms that have more runoff points and will speed up the cool down, while the deepest part of the lake, furthest from the majority of the runoff, can be several degrees warmer by the dam, but this is kind of the area that pattern I try to follow on this lake. As I start off usually my season in the early part of the fall in September and October up on those river arms and in the midsection of the lake, and as we get further down towards November, I'm in the midsection and starting to get down here by the dam, and as we start to hit the early winter part and really late fall, right down here by the dam in this section here is going to be your best bet to go keep catching some good white bass numbers and size. It's key to be flexible in your time on the water during the fall transition as we fish for white bass. I hope you found this video helpful, that you learned something about white bass fishing in the fall on Stockton Lake. Since you stayed to the end of this video, here are 2 more that I know you'll like. Till next time, tight lines, and remember to explore deeper. There's more out there.